So good evening, everybody. First of all, let me thank our panelists who are busy persons. They have to go and give their comments on television channels. And there are many other things happening. One is seeing things in Bihar or somewhere else. So this is not some kind of game. Many people think this is I can say our senior ambassador Gare Khan, who is not India, he sent a message saying it's very good idea, Surinder. Another friend says, what are you wasting time for? What are you going to predict? I said, look, we are not predicting. This is not like conjecture. All these friends have analyzed various developments and they already put some rational reasons for saying what they want to say. So as I mentioned, all of you 9 minutes, you can speak on anything you want. Some of you might have received my letter in which I indicated some areas of my preference, but that is not restricted. I mean, you can always say. So we will begin with Professor Kondapalli because Chinese dragon shadows are everywhere. First, whatever you might say, first you please tell us which minister will go missing this year. And whether Taiwan issue is there, then US, China, India, China, so many things are there in economy. I was reading somewhere else that Chinese have already developed a super chip. So all the threat about that crippling their economy. Anyway, I can't guess what you're going to say. Over to you, Professor Kondapalli. 9 minutes. You have to unmute. You unmute your mic. I think you're in front, there must be some button for unmuting. Professor Kondapalli, your mic is not. Okay, let me see. Can you now unmute? What is happening? Kondapalli, let me see. Can you now unmute? Can you try now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Surendra Kumar. Good evening to all of you. To start on a positive note, based on Chinese propaganda, they grew at 5.3% in 2023, but the 1.4% growth rate in China. So huge difference between the official National Bureau of Statistics and even the IMF, who said about 5% growth rate. The Rhodium Group mentioned about 1.4% growth rate for China. So that is the contradiction. And generally, the Chinese GDP figures are suspect. They include a lot of items in this. So that is the major problem in the calculation of the economy. So that is the, in 2022, they grew at 3.3%. So the figures are then relatively less when we compare with the 10% growth rates before. The expected growth rate this year, 2024, is about 4 to 4.5%. Again, these are official figures. We do not know. So if the government implements some supportive policies, infrastructure spending, tax cuts, and so on, there is a possibility for 4% growth rate. But in general, there is a deceleration in economic growth rates due to the deflationary trends. And the major uncertainty is the COVID-19 related problems. The demand is very low and the property market is shrinking. 2-3 days ago, the Hong Kong judge had asked the Evergrande to liquidate. Some $350 billion is going to go down the drain, affecting actually the outside investors from UK, US, and others. And this is going to be a big problem for China. in the coming months in terms of settling down these real estate sector challenge. Then there is also the Shanghai Stock Exchange wiped off some $6 trillion. And good news, of course, is Mumbai replaced Hong Kong as the fourth largest stock exchange in terms of the valuation, capitalization. So that is the economy. And the Xi Jinping's policy is to have more domestic consumption, less dependence on the external markets, possibly even not much dependence on the FDI. So this policy initiated in the 14th mark, and I think there will be some restrictions on the domestic companies. There wouldn't be much dependence on other countries in terms of the investments. China is also the major investor abroad, $1.6 trillion, and some 460 companies in Europe have been taken away by the Chinese companies. So in manufacturing and in aerospace. So this is the Chinese confidence this year. Second area, apart from the growth rates, is the innovation, which is very close to Xi Jinping in terms of this innovation-driven model. There is technological advancements. Ambassador Kumar mentioned about the chips, 7 nanometer length. However, the Huawei has been put under scanner since 2022 October with $130 billion sanctions by the Americans. And early last year, March 2023, again, there were restrictions. So these are likely to continue despite the Filoli meeting in San Francisco and 2 days ago by Wang Yi and Jake Sullivan in the US. So we do see a cautious optimism in this regard in terms of US-China relations spilling over into the semiconductor industry and tariffs and other. But it is very likely that China will make some advancements in AI, renewable energy, and biotechnology. Elon Musk mentioned that China, if given a free rein, could surge the EV markets all across the world. And also this is a concern for the European Union in terms of the subsidies the state is providing for these electrical vehicles. So some policy adjustments are likely to happen in the property market and also stimulate the consumer spending. But the big question is, of course, the economy, and that will have a spillover effect on other issues like the political and the foreign policy, on military and others. At the political level, quickly, very less time I want to spend on this, is the intensification of Communist Party factional struggles. Li Keqiang passed away. Hu Junhua was given some ornamental postings. Hu Jintao, we all saw what happened in the 20th Party Congress. Events in 2022 October. So there is the issue here on factional struggles. Li Qiang versus Liu He. Liu He is the right-hand man for Xi Jinping in terms of the economic issues, but mainly the premier is dealing with all these, and Li Qiang has gone to the Davos, suggesting to the investors about things that are rosy in China. And so there is the speculation about Liu He and Li differences and spilling over into the political arena. So mainly the focus of China in the political issues is to maintain stability and also economic progress. National security issues are going to be also major problem areas, and this was identified by the previous party Congress. And so I think that is the coming to the foreign policy domain. China's focus will be on global development initiative, global security initiative, global civilizational initiative. We could possibly see more of these. In addition to the focus on BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, the third forum was held last October. And $97 billion additional funding is provided for this. But in general, Xi Jinping is focusing on upgrading the technology, industry, and so on. So that is the United States is the biggest worry for China, and San Francisco meeting and the current meeting between Wang Yi and the U.S. National Security Advisor is going to be the benchmark on which they would try to stabilize the bilateral relations. So far, Biden has commented that they wanted to explore more communications, while Xi Jinping mentioned about, or rather, meeting with the US congressional delegation last year. Xi Jinping said that the Chinese are not preparing for the replacement of the US as the global hegemon. So I think that wind has been China related, but it is likely that Taiwan, geopolitical rivalry, climate change issues, global issues on nuclear, and of course on Red Sea, Israel, Hamas, as well as the Ukrainian conflict are going to be the problem areas for US and China. These are the larger issues. In relation to European Union, climate change, trade and investments, technology and industrial policy, human rights and rule of law, Taiwan issue, and US-China rivalry as a variable in EU-China relations. EU declared that China is a systemic rival, and so specifically on EVs, and Italy has come out of the BRI. Nevertheless, Germany, France, and other countries are increasing. So this is likely to become a friction point in the near future, as well as the market access in China. Coming to India, we are likely to see the stalemate continuing on the border till the elections are over, somewhere in April, May, whatever the time frame. And there is some speculation about to be appointed as the ambassador. I just want to inform everyone that for the past 6, 7, or even 10 years, no Chinese ambassador completed his term, and mainly this is due to the BRI related, and of course now Galwan has been added as part of the friction point. Wei Wei did not complete, Chang Yang could not complete the term, and 3 more ambassadors, Sun Weidong, Luo Chaohui, Le Yucheng, these have not been able to convince India to join the BRI because of the CPEC projects and, of course, the larger geopolitical rivalry. Quickly also turning to the military, Chinese military, like Qin Kang was replaced by Wang Yi in the foreign ministry. There is also Li Shangfu replaced by Tang Chun, an admiral. So indicator then is the maritime focus. Indicator then is Taiwan and South China Sea, major areas of confrontation, very likely to happen, especially in terms of Taiwan. PLA 100th anniversary is in 2027, and Lai Ching-te was elected this month in Taiwan. So it is likely that there will be an escalation in conflict in the Taiwan Straits. China is expected to increase the defense budget despite the growth rates coming down. Last year, there is an increase of nearly more than what the economic growth rates have been. So it is likely to have increased defense budget. New equipment, training, research, those are the areas. And others, artificial intelligence, hypersonics, cyber warfare are the key technologies that are likely to be deployed. And of course, there is an internal reform happening in the PLA in terms of the joint logistics. That
Yes,
is the
Professor.
focus. And
think
as part of
it's
this, we are
over.
likely to see growing assertiveness of China. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. You have skillfully ducked my question about the missing possibility of any other minister missing. Thank you. My apologies. I did not introduce you all, but because you are all the time on television writing articles every day. But still, let me add one line. Professor Mandapalli, you know, China expert. He has been professor of Chinese studies at JNU for a long, long time. We have Dr. Awaz, as you know, he is a analyst, independent. He was the Syrian news agency head for 14 years. And he's currently, I think, vice president of the Foreign Correspondents Club. And he is also distinguished fellow at the advisor on West Asia of Tilottama Foundation. Professor, our ambassador Deepak Bhojwani, as you know, he is our Latin American expert. He is ambassador to Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba. He writes on Latin America quite often. We have our friend Rajiv Bhatia. Everybody knows him. He is writing every week in Hindu and other newspapers. He has been ambassador to Myanmar. He was our High Commissioner to South Africa. He was ambassador to Mexico. He was ambassador, High Commissioner to Kenya, and he's a distinguished fellow at the Gateway House. And we have Arun. Arun is expert. Actually, he has the expertise on all the areas. He was ambassador to Israel. He was ambassador to France, and he was ambassador to USA. So I think now we will move it to Deepak. You have a whole South American continent under your belt, and you are most welcome to. You have elections in Argentina recently, and now Brazil is the president of G20, and Mexico also a lot of happening. Let us hear your views. What will happen in remaining 11 months? Over to you, Deepak.
Thank you so much, Surendraji. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Basically, let me very briefly introduce what we consider Latin America and the Caribbean. 33 countries spread over a territory of almost 22 million square meters. That's about 8 times the size of India, and 7 times. And with a population of under 700 million, which is half of that of India. Countries like Brazil itself is 2.6 times the size of India. Chile, which looks like a slim thread on the map, from top to bottom is longer than Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Just to give you an idea of the dimensions. It's also extremely rich in resources, apart from agricultural resources like water, animal husbandry, agriculture, and so on. It also has a massive deposit of fuel, oil and gas, which we import into India. It also has massive deposits of very, very important minerals, apart from iron ore, gold, copper, which we import, especially gold and copper. We also have now lithium, which has been found in the southern cone, and which we are going to be entering into partnerships to exploit. The Indian government has formed a consortium. So basically, the relationship goes back a long way since our independence, and even before. We have diplomatic relations with all countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, but we only have about 21 embassies, if I'm not mistaken. There are 26 Latin American and Caribbean embassies in India, and we're hopefully going to catch up with them. China has diplomatic relations with all the Latin American countries who have recognized it, bar 6, which means they're ahead of us, although they started in 1970. Political relations are excellent. We have no problems with any country. As I said, we have embassies everywhere, and the relationships, however, are more in terms of bilateral exchanges, and they are growing. It has taken some time. We have certain differences. They have a totally anti-nuclear policy, but they recognize our right to have nuclear weapons. They also have been coming around more and more to India's concept of a sort of non-alignment, or what we might today call strategic autonomy. They almost all of them believe in the concept of the global south intrinsically and honestly, as a result of which they have been taking positions which are pretty independent, whether it's on Ukraine or on the Israel-Palestine question, and several other questions also. We are the main economic connection with Latin America, which is really the most important one, is essentially our trade, which has grown to approximately $50 billion in 22-23. Now, this target was actually reached about 10 years before, but that was when oil was being exported in much larger quantities before Venezuela fell off the oil map due to sanctions levied by the US. Now, Venezuela may come back to supply oil, in which case these quantities will increase. The trade happens to be pretty lopsided with mainly natural resources, oil. About, I'd say, of the trade of $50 billion, currently about 10 to $15 billion, give or take, in any given year is import of crude oil from there, and approximately 8 to $10 billion in export of refined products from here. There's approximately 8 to $12 billion a year of import of gold, which is a relatively recent phenomenon because it used to be mined in Latin America, South America, and would be refined in Switzerland, but that has now come directly onto the bilateral trade. Apart from that, we import huge quantities of copper. We import a tremendous amount of agricultural products, especially edible oils, from Brazil and Argentina mainly. So these constitute the bulk of our trade from there. On the other side, it so happens that Mexico has in recent years become the largest export market for Indian automobiles, about $600 million per year and growing. It's an incredible statistic. Apart from that, we have a huge market, apart from automobiles, and we have Bajaj, TVS, we have all the major auto manufacturers, Hero, etc., who actually have plants in Latin America. They've actually invested there. We have pharma companies which have also invested there. They actually have manufacturing plants over there. We have chemicals. We have some textile exports, basically value-added exports. This is the complexion. There is the balance of trade has been in favor of Latin America because, as I said, the bulk commodities. But increasingly, the value that we get from our exports has been very important. We are still a fraction of the trade of the US and Europe, and now China, which has reached a level of bilateral trade of $350 billion already, and it is growing. The other aspect of our economic relationship is investments. We have dozens of Indian companies dotted all over Latin America, whether it's software like TCS and Infosys. TCS itself has approximately 25,000 individuals employed in Latin America, doing not just process outsourcing, but even software for them. And this is all nearshoring for the US and European markets. So it's a very important part of the world for us. Apart from that, we have big companies like the Birlas, we have the Tatas, we have UPL, a lot of companies which have gone into that region and have made very important investments. But it still has to take on the shape of our investments in Africa, because the difference between Latin America and Africa is, apart from the post-colonial connection, which in my view grew stronger in Africa, the problem also was that Latin America was oriented towards its old colonial connections in Europe principally, and then after that to the US. So as a result of which, connections developed a little more slowly, apart from the geographical distance, which is being overcome more and more, but it has played a part because you don't have direct connections, air connections, and so on. And even the shipping connections are not as viable as they should be, which is unfortunate because China has overcome that handicap. We still have to. So as a result, Africa draws much more Indian investment. It draws much more Indian lines of credit from the government, etc. Whereas Latin America has almost languished. Hopefully, this will be overcome in the near future. And then we have, sorry.
Deepak, what is your big ticket prediction for next 11 months? Whatever you're saying is very, very important, very informative, but we are talking about 11 months.
Well, the next 11 months, first of all, there is going to be a fracture in Latin American politics because you have an election of Donald Trump in Argentina, who has a very radical policy. We'll have to see what he does. He has rejected the invitation to join the BRICS, and we don't know if he's going to change his mind. On the other hand, in Brazil, you have a very stable government of President Lula, who has been a friend of India, and we see that relationship growing. In Mexico, you have a left-wing president who will have to hand over power next year when there are elections, We don't know what the complexion of that government will be, but Mexico is oriented very heavily towards the US for economic reasons and is increasingly looking to China. For the next 11 months, Surendraji, what I would say is what we have to keep our eye on is the Chinese presence in that region. It is extremely strong. They are capturing a lot of resources, and their investment portfolio is extremely heavy, basically fed by inexpensive and cheap credit to their state companies and even some private companies. They're doing massive infrastructure projects. Latin America is open for investment and trade, and I think we need to take advantage of this. One more thing which I will say is that the strategic relationship is also very important and is nascent. We have launched satellites for Brazil and Argentina, but we still have to get off the ground in terms of the overall strategic relationship. For instance, Brazil has sold us the Embraer aircraft, which we have got. We are now looking for more strategic investments between India and Brazil in the aviation market, in the outer space market. Outer space is an area with Brazil which we can do. The defense minister of Argentina, Jorge Tayana, was here in India a few months ago. They talked about buying the Tejas, but I don't think that will happen in the near future. But they are interested in, say, helicopters. Ecuador has bought helicopters from us. There's a huge potential in the strategic space.
Okay. Thank you very much. You have given a lot of information, and I'm sure it is worth noting, even though you are not reserved there. Now, before I turn to the next speaker, I must really apologize. I did not mention my friend Manoj Joshi. He's not Manoj Joshi, he's Dr. Manoj Joshi. He has written a book on China, which even Chinese expert told me, even NSA, former NSA Shankar Menon told me, it's a very serious seminal book. Before Manoj Joshi, I will turn to Dr. Awad. We had him on our virtual discussion on Israel-Hamas case. Now, Dr. Awad, you are the most informed person to tell us what is going to happen. Let us concentrate on 11 months, because all things are happening, may continue happening. Let us see whether we can see the end of this disastrous conflict going on. 25,000 Palestinians dead, and no end seems to be there. Over to you, Dr. Awad.
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for keeping me and such a distinguished panelist whom I enjoy listening and knowing them personally. My take on this is I just want to say welcome to the Middle East and North African state, because it's a very dynamic, complex, unpredictable. So we do not know how to see the situation. If you want to look at the Israel-Palestinian or Israel-Gaza's actions, we need to know that whatever is the outcome will have a major impact on the region. However, I just wanted to highlight a few points before I come to this, because there are other issues where we need to see of the prospects of the 2024, though Israel-Gaza will continue to dominate the 2024. But I feel that the regional power dynamics also we need to focus, like the Algerian, Moroccan rifts over the Sahara, especially after using the other route of the trades away from the Red Sea, which we need to focus. It may flare up. Secondly, we have to look at the election in Tunisia, which is very important, because as you know, Tunisia has played a major role in the Arab Spring, which was called Arab Spring, and then we continue to have the disastrous winter spring in the Arab world and autumn. So therefore, the outcome of the election also will have either changing of leaderships or no. And I think what we need to look at the economic challenges in the region. What are the economic challenges will be like in terms of condition of oil prices and oil economic reforms. And then I think we should look at the conflict and stability, whether there will be a rift between like Egypt and Qatar, Syria and the United States, and now Jordan is coming in the fold, Iran and the United States and Israel. So we need to see all these angles to it and see the demographic changes, considering the changes also in terms of economic and population changes, the drifting into this conflict. This will have a major effect on the leaderships and the dynamic of the development in this part of the world. So coming back to the war on Gaza, Ambassador, it's continuously, it will continue, and it's continuing As we counting body right now, it's crossed the 33,000 per person dead. More than 1 million out of the 2.3 million people population in Gaza are women, are already internally displaced, and they are at the receiving end. And not to count that 14 to 20 massacres daily has been happening in the West Bank, in Gaza strips, and also East Jerusalem, where we are counting bodies only. And therefore, this war will continue. The new development in this, that we have seen that some of the regional power, which is considered to be an Iranian, pro-Iranian, or axis of resistance, which comes from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and the Yemeni Houthis, Ansarullah, all these have been actively involved, indirectly or directly, in a conflict with Israel or with the United States military bases in the region. So we have seen that the resistance in Lebanon have been keeping the Israelis busy and the northern part. And we have seen lots of Israeli military movement toward the northern part of Israel. That is a prediction could be a sort of an attack on Hezbollah and pushing them back around 10 kilometers inside the Lebanese territories. So this is one of the development. The second is the Houthi also, which have shown that there is a huge involvement in the war, with the low cost war and high cost for the United States and the West, especially after the US and Britain have unilaterally, without even sanctions from the UN, start attacking the Houthis, and the Houthis retaliated by enlarging. And they said now it's not only the Israelis' ship, it is also the ships which going to from US and UK, and therefore there will be a huge cost and impact on the global trade, and also as well as in the oil trade in that part of the world. If we look at the attack on the American soldiers in one of the military base closer to the border with Jordan, which is called Nataf, which American have said it is inside Jordan. And Jordan denied it, by the way, that it was in their territory, that the 3 American soldiers and 34 were injured. But if I have to see the trends of the United States policy makers, which they are trying to say that these are being killed, and ignoring the more than 200 attack on the American bases inside Iraq and the northern eastern part of Syria, since the war on Gaza has started, that give you an indication that the United States is playing a major role in dragging this region into a more wider war, because that's what Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, wanted to see the American involvement in a regional war. And it is not Gaza or not the Palestinian, which they are after. It is only the Syrian, the Lebanese, and the Iranian. So there has to be some sort of movement. If Iran has been attacked or is going to be attacked, then we are looking at a total blockage of the trade from the Strait of Hormuz, from the Persian Gulf, into the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea and the Sinai Peninsula. So there will be a huge impact globally and regionally. So all this factor, if we put it in the basket of the Israeli-Palestinian attack, if the Israeli does not stop the carnage on Gaza, then we can expect that this is going to further flare up the situation, and then we will not see an end to the war. We will see more of original involvement and more, despite the fact that people talking of involvement of mediators like Qatar, like Egypt, like the United States, trying to release the hostages held by the Hamas. But at the same time, Hamas is insisting that they wanted a permanent ceasefire, and then you can have a sort of an exchange for this. So the International Court of Justice also have raised the issue. Now we can see that the Palestinian issue become an international issue, which people, try to make it a bilateral between Israel and the Palestinian. But nowadays, the whole world is involved, because this is going to have a huge impact on the future of stability in the region. That brings me to the talk also of the IMEC of India economic corridors, which they have been talked about, that it comes from India toward the Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, Israel, and toward the European. That is an alternative route to the Silk Route. So if that is the trends of the development in this region, I don't see any future visibility of this IMEC to develop unless and until there is a sort of stability, because nobody buys fish in the water or harvest in a turbulent water. So you can't get the things done without the war. So if the Israelis continue with the war on the Palestinian, I don't see any future for stability in this part of the world. That's what we are looking at. Now, if the American, now we have to see the regional player. China stepped in, Russia stepped in, Turkey stepped in, and now Iran and Saudi Arabia. So the things, they are having a major stake in the region, whether it is toward the Palestinian issue, whether it is toward their own interest in this part of the world, because the Russian and the Chinese are filling the vacuum where the United States have been leaving, because the United States is no more seen in the Arab eyes as an honest peace broker. It's totally standing with the Israelis. So therefore, there is a huge anti-American feeling in this part of the world. However, this will not change the paradigms of the American policy in the region. And I don't see much of the Chinese able to do without the American involvement, because America will not leave this huge interest of its own to the Chinese to come involved. But however, with the expansion of the BRICS and bringing in on board 3 major Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt, I think there will be some sort of a geopolitical balance of power between the major power and their interest. So all these factors have to be looked into it. And I think various militia groups, which play a major role and pro-Iranian, if the American is not willing to solve the nuclear issue and come in terms with the Iranian, I think these regional players or factions or militia will continue to attack on the pretext that Israel is not willing to finish this war. So Israel has to finish this war by all means. And then we have to see a peace process taking place, which I don't see it very much on the near future. It's very pessimistic, but I still feel I am a little optimistic on that.
Before Dr. Awad, just one. Will Bibi last for next 11 months?
Look, Bibi is a part of the right-wing Israelis, chauvinist, ultra orthodox people who have joined the government. 1993, after Oslo Agreement, we had 55% of the Israeli interested in peace with the Arab. Now we have only 5 to 10% of the Israelis. So I think Bibi or thousands of Bibis will continue, because the anti-Arab movement in Israel or anti-Palestinians is so much so that they are not interested even in finding any Palestinian violent state next to Israel.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to my friend, Dr. Manoj Joshi. Now I have not requested you confine to any, but whatever you can tell us in 9 minutes, covering the whole world. Dr. Manoj Joshi.
Yeah. My intention is not to repeat what the earlier speaker did. I'm going to stick to the guidelines.
Point by point, prediction.
That's exactly what you will get. That's exactly what you'll get.
Okay.
So thanks for having me on your program. There is this saying, may you live in interesting times. In native Chinese, it actually means living in peaceful, uninteresting times is a blessing compared to interesting times, which are what we are living in. So last few years have seen a lot of interesting times: COVID, Russia-Ukraine war, Israel-Hamas war, economic turbulence, wars in Africa. So the key feature of 2024 will be elections in India as well as in most important partner, United States. Elections are also due in Russia. They are also due in other countries. But what will be important for us is the outcome in the US, since Mr. Modi is likely to win easily in India, and the polls in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Bhutan. Now, of course, Bhutan has already happened. Pakistan is yet to happen. Bangladesh has also happened. So these elections are what's before us. Now, US President Biden will win, in my opinion, he will win the election. Biden. So now you asked for forecast, I'm giving forecast.
I'm underlining it.
Economic good news is only now gathering momentum. And his is crucial in this outcome. There will be other issues that will make the victory a bit damp. There will be problems. The victory will not be unalloyed. For example, the Republicans could capture the Senate, since they have to defend 23 seats against the Republicans' 11. Democrats right now have a 51-49 majority right now. So the Senate may switch sides, But in turn, the Democrats could recapture the House. All they need is to lose 5 seats. People will, because all the Republicans need to lose 5 seats, people will vote against Trump rather than support Biden. So what I'm trying to get at is the election outcome will be not because people like Biden, but people dislike Trump. You see? And so that will, with that point, he will squeak through. Because the US election process is very complex. And a lot depends on electoral votes in different, so-called, what should I say, key states. So, but in any case, for the sake of the program, I thought I would make this forecast that Biden will win.
Next forecast.
Okay. Now, next forecast. In Pakistan, a return of Nawaz Sharif could lead to détente with India. His chemistry with Modi has been good. And as it is, Islamabad, which is having to deal with terrorism, economic meltdown, has been made aware of the very great importance of good ties with India. Now, of course, we know that Islamabad is still sending terrorists across what happened in Poonch and Rajouri, etc. But I think that a Nawaz victory could open up the possibility of a détente with India. Okay, the next forecast, Sri Lanka also has an election. As you know, it's not clear as to whether Ranil will be able to return to power. It's not clear. Because Ranil is, the problem with Ranil is that he has been associated with Gotabaya and company. So I'm not sure whether this thing, it depends on, to an extent, on his ability to restore some economic stability in the economy. If he's able to show that, he can take charge of that, that may help. Now, another forecast.
What is
forecast, Ukraine could see a ceasefire.
Okay.
Because right now what is happening is that the Ukrainian offensive has stalled. On the ground, whether it is the air, whether it is the ground, it is the Russians who are hitting Ukraine. And then when you take it in conjunction with the fact that Ukraine is finding it difficult to get support in United States and Europe to continue the battle, I think it may agree to a ceasefire. Now, okay, so that's another forecast. Another forecast, Israel. Netanyahu, I think, will be unseated as prime minister. He is really detested. Meaning, I think his support is right now about 4 or 5% of the Israeli population. Now, and part of the reason why the war is continuing, part of the reason is the mischief that Netanyahu is playing in a bid to remain in power. He's playing his own games, but his games are not for Israel, his games are for himself. He wants to survive. Okay, then the next forecast, in UK, the Labour Party will be elected. I don't think I'm making a great forecast out here, you see, because the Conservative Party has simply not able to get its act together. And the Labour just has to sit tight, not say very much, and it will coast to victory. The difference between them right now in the polls is huge, huge. Okay, so now I'm coming towards the end of my program, of my presentation. Remember also, that I am a Jyotishi. My family profession, I'm a Joshi. You see? So back in the 17th century, we were actually Bhardwaj. But in the 17th century, one of my ancestors became a Jyotishi. So thereafter, we became Joshis.
Did you go to Ayodhya?
So I'm saying, listen to my forecast carefully. So now, the one big imponderable is India's ties with China. There has been little, Srikanth has given us a great amount of detail on China, economics, politics, etc. There has been little significant movement in 2023. Ties are frozen and there's a kind of a cold war since China blockaded Indian petrol points. There was supposedly a candid and in-depth exchange of views between Modi and Xi Jinping at the BRICS summit, but that's about all. There has been no further action. And I think India, in fact, has been taking more counter-Chinese steps than even the United States and other countries. Indian stand is much harder on China. So now, finally, the coming year will have black swans. They will have black swan events which can't be predicted. You see? But there will also be what is called grey rhino events. Grey rhino events which are obvious, you see? The obvious obstacles, but we'll go and crash into them. See? As of now, of course, things are going smoothly. As far as India is concerned, things are going smoothly. The government has a spring in its step and is getting ready to win the election. Meanwhile, they're doing all kinds of things in different places like Bihar, Chandigarh, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have been more candid and more daring and bold coming out with your predictions. We will see what happens. We will again meet in December. Okay, now I turn to my friend Rajiv, your entire African continent, and you have written a book on that. Myanmar, you have written a book on that. You've been writing recently on Quad and Indo-Pacific, whatnot. So do what you want to do in your 9 minutes. Make prediction like Manoj, or you send me a message. You have 5 important predictions to make. You can even make 10. I don't mind, so long as you can do it in a limited time. How about you?
Thank you very much, Surendra. This is a wonderful format you have conceived. And I would like to simply say that unlike Manoj, I don't have a Jyotishi in my ancestry. So I'll use my diplomatic background to present to you, risk analysis oriented forecasts. And they would be very specific because I think that was the whole spirit of this program. I have chosen 5 predictions for your consideration, and they relate to different parts of my so-called portfolio. First, on Myanmar. Here the country wrecked by long civil war after the military coup 3 years back. So experts say that Myanmar is facing 3 likely scenarios. The regime wins, that is the military wins and imposes unchallenged military rule. Second, the resistance wins and brings federal democracy. And third, that there would be balkanization. I feel that none of this will come through in this year. What is most likely to happen is that the current political, security, and diplomatic stalemate will continue, and we would be still discussing Myanmar in December 2024, but it would be probably in worse condition than it is today. Second, Maldives, which is at the front of mind of many people here. We can say that the presidency of Mr. Muizu, which is barely 3 months old or less, is already facing serious domestic challenges. And essentially, this is because of his initial steps, which are pro-China strategy. The opposition parties are gunning for him. They are in the process to move an impeachment motion. So the question is, will Maldives go pro-China or pro-India or pro-Maldives in terms of adopting a balanced policy which gives them good chance to be friends with both India and China? My analysis shows that the answer lies in the result of the bid to impeach President Muizu in the coming days and the outcome of the Majlis election on 17 March. A clear prediction is difficult, but on balance, it seems to me that if Muizu saves his presidency, he may become more emboldened to take Maldives closer to China than at present. Fourth, Indonesia, a country both Deepak and I served in. The presidential and parliamentary elections are due to take place on 14 February. Of the 3 presidential candidates, Prabowo Subianto is likely to be the next president. The incumbent president, Joko Widodo, supports him, that is, supports Subianto, rather than his own party's candidate. The deal is clear. Once we note that Prabowo's vice presidential mate is Gibran R. Raka, the son of President Jokovic. So Parivar Vad has indeed reached Indonesia. It is assumed that as president, Prabowo will follow Widodo's economic policies. He might be more assertive with regard to China, but he would also try to move closer to the US as well. And he's all set to take the new capital to Nusantara, which is on the east coast of Kalimantan. My fourth prediction very quickly is about African Union and G20. A lot of African leaders conveyed appreciation and thanks to India for its great leadership to ensure that African Union entered the G20. But listen to this, it's very interesting that our feedback from the serving or operating diplomatic levels shows that the enthusiasm in Africa for G20 is minimal. The center point is that African Union needs to line up a lot of financial and institutional resources to make its presence felt. I think it's not going to happen during Brazil's presidency. It may happen during the next year's presidency of South Africa. My last prediction, this is about BRICS. BRICS, the expanded BRICS now has 10 countries, as we know. It is to take considerable time, maybe next 2 or 3 years, to develop a new personality, because this change from 5 countries to 10 countries is very significant. I think a transition period can be expected before these countries, the old ones and the new ones, can develop some kind of a dynamic of their own. But in the meantime, Russia will leverage fully its presidency in 2024 to project the notion that it is not isolated, that it has powerful friends backing it, and that BRICS is turning out to be the counterpoise to G7. Thank you.
Thank you. Very precise and concrete your predictions. I hope they come true. Before I call the next speaker, tell me, President Ramaphosa has shown courage and boldness to take action, which he did on Israel issue, taking it to International Court of Justice. Does he enjoy support of African countries on this issue?
What was the last sentence? Does he enjoy?
Does he enjoy support of other African countries on this issue? Or this is entirely South African, his own view? Because many people think he has gone too far, perhaps, to be bold enough to take it to he used the language called this. We tried.
Got it. Got it. I think South Africa is the vanguard for this kind of work. It is not that the African countries are opposing him, but they are supporting in a very quiet and low-key manner. Fundamentally, it is in South African DNA, the opposition to apartheid, the Mandela-Arafat friendship, the continuous history of cooperation between PLO and ANC, African National Congress. So all that has gone into this. One more factor I'm told from my South African friends, South Africa has one of the finest battery of human rights lawyers and judges. And a very powerful team was deployed at ICJ. And obviously they have won a pretty significant victory, as you know. Thank you.
Okay. Now I turn to Arun. You have heard everybody and you have the last word and you have a lot to say. Now prediction, I don't know. Manoj has made one prediction, you might have another one, but at least India is in a very good situation. Whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump, Prime Minister Modi has same warmth and bonhomie and enjoys personal chemistry for both of them. So please take it, because you will also have your personal experience with Israel and you were in France, so you can tell what the Europeans are doing and what is, try to sort of confine to what we are seeing in next 11 months or so. Okay.
Thank you, Ambassador Surit Kumar. So I'll try and speak in the confines of what you have said, both in content and the time. And taking off from what our common friend Manoj Joshi said, and of course he can be far more bold being a journalist earlier. But I think in the US election, there's only one person who knows what the outcome of that election will be, and which is President Trump. Because if he wins, he will say he has won. If he loses, he will say he has still won and has been denied the victory. But at the moment, most people believe that it's too close to call. Because if you look at New Hampshire, where he defeated Nikki Haley quite convincingly in the primary, but in the analysis of voters, the college-educated voted largely for Nikki Haley. Those earning more than $100,000 a year voted largely for Nikki Haley. Among women, again, those who were college-educated voted for Nikki Haley. So and the independents voted largely for Nikki Haley, because in the New Hampshire primary, independents are also allowed to vote. So given that, certain segment of the population will certainly not vote for President Trump. I think for President Biden, the challenge is that on the economy, despite the growth that has happened, unemployment levels are not very high, inflation has been controlled. There is a sense in the US, general feeling that the economy has not worked very well in the last few years. So that's a challenge. Prices had gone up, fuel prices had gone up. But also there are reports that because of the US administration's current stance on the Israel-Hamas conflict, segments of the African American populations and segments of the Muslim and Arab population in the US have been alienated from President Trump, and therefore in some key states like Wisconsin and Michigan, they who would otherwise have voted for the Democratic Party either may not vote at all or may vote against him. So those are the dilemmas that are playing out. But again, on the other hand, if President Trump receives a severe conviction in one of the many cases against him in the process or close to the election, that can affect the outcome. Or alternatively, there is a perception related to President Biden's health issues. And so if there is some enhanced concern on health issues closer to the election, that can impact. So at the moment, I think the best prediction for the US election would be too close to call, and we will all be watching with biting our fingernails around midnight on the day of the elections. And as I said, the only person who will know definitely is President Trump. In other issues that the US has been involved in, and that's the lens from which I'm approaching various issues. I think on Russia-Ukraine, the general expectation is that the stalemate will continue. Russia, the momentum seems to be in favor of Russia, and Russia has its own larger independent defense industrial capacity as compared to Ukraine, more manpower as compared to Ukraine. The West capacity to supply Ukraine with defense items has been seen to be limited. There is some hesitation now in US Congress to continue supplying more and more economic assistance to Ukraine, and you're seeing that challenge playing out. If President Trump gets elected, there could be further holding back on that. So the expectation is that Western support for Ukraine, while it will be sustained, whether it can be enhanced is a question mark. Russia has greater capacities, manpower, defense, industrial production, but whether it will have the capacity to change the front line in a major way is again a question mark. So what we will probably see continued stalemate, but growing integration, economic and military, of Ukraine with the West. And so to that extent, it is a negative development for Russia, because you now have two additional NATO countries, Finland, potentially Sweden in a couple of months, and Ukraine, what is not under Russia's control, getting closer to Europe and the US. So that's one dimension. I think in West Asia, again, an area where US is heavily involved, one can hope and predict that perhaps a ceasefire will eventually emerge between Israel and Hamas. When? But at some level, the conflict is likely to continue, because Israel has set for itself the objective that it will eliminate the capacity of Hamas to continue with a governance and control structure in Gaza. Now, eliminating Hamas may be difficult. In the past, for example, Israel was not able to eliminate Hezbollah in Lebanon. They moved the PLO out of Lebanon, and then Hezbollah emerged in the 18 years of Israeli presence in Lebanon, especially southern Lebanon. US was not able to eliminate the Taliban in Afghanistan. So to what extent Israel will be able to achieve the objective it has set for itself is a question. So if it is not able to achieve the objective, it will not want to give up some kind of security control both over West Bank and Gaza, which is contrary to what the US and others are saying, and which is also contrary to how the Arab countries are asking for forward movement in the process. So although there is a demand from other partners of Israel and others who are involved that there should be ceasefire, there should be a combined Palestinian Authority control over West Bank and Gaza, there should be some kind of a process starting towards a two-state solution, get other Arab countries involved with a buy-in, that there is regional integration. My assessment based on what I have seen is that all that is not likely to happen. And that given the current situation, Israel will want to maintain its security control. And what are the implications for that and how that plays out, we'll have to watch. I think looking from there at what's playing out in the Indo-Pacific and US-China relationship, I think what the US has managed to do after the heightened rhetoric during the Trump period and the heightened rhetoric during the Biden period is reintroduce balanced frameworks for communication between US and China. So now there are meetings at different levels. Even the military communication channels have been opened. The National Security Advisor of US is meeting his counterpart, recently met him in Bangkok. The commander of the US Indo-PACOM has said that since President Biden's meeting with President Xi in November, the common Chinese practice of interfering with the sailings of US ships or flying of aircraft over South China Sea, that has stopped. And those sailings are taking place without any hindrance interference. So obviously, US has been wanting at this time to reestablish all this. One, of course, as they say, they don't want unintended consequences to play out and misinterpretation. But more than that, they want to see if they can reduce to the extent they can Chinese military support for Russia in the context of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And so that's one objective. And then, they've been asking them to reach out through Iran to the Houthis. North Korea has ratcheted up its rhetoric related to South Korea, so they want support there, and of course on climate change issues. So as of now, in the run-up to the US elections, because the Chinese would certainly not be very comfortable with President Trump coming back, I would think that in the US-China relationship, there will be a modicum of stability, although the basic element of competition will remain. Because US continues to say that despite whatever is happening in West Asia, despite whatever happening in Russia, Ukraine, China is the primary challenge to US leadership in the global context. And the Americans don't believe the Chinese when they say that they don't intend to replace the US in the international system. They believe that's just part of the old, hiding your strength and biding your time, and that's not really their intent. And the final point I'd like to say is on the US-India relationship, because that's what matters to us. And I would think that the trajectory of the relationship, despite some challenges we have, including difference of position, let's say, on Russia-Ukraine, some other issues that had cropped up, the trajectory of the relationship is likely to be sustained. Since last year, high-level technology cooperation has been made the defining parameter of the relationship. There is tremendous effort by both sides to advance that in a meaningful way, including in semiconductors, in defense, in space cooperation. NASA and ISRO are soon going to launch combined synthetic aperture radar satellite. US and India will soon launch a joint mission to the International Space Station. There's promoting collaboration for the NASA's commercial lunar space program. So be it Biden, be it Trump, the trajectory will continue. And certainly in the next 11, 12 months that you're looking at, the positive trajectory of the relationship will continue. So let me stop.
Thank you, Arun. Before I move on, tell me, US first start decoupling from China. Then they came de-risking. And then all developing reliable supply chains. How many supply chains have really come into existence? De-risking is also not indirect admission that actually you can't be decoupled from Chinese economy.
No, that's true. So that is why now the way they've defined it, because they need to define a narrative which becomes a guiding principle for different parts of the administration. So now the narrative, as you know, is small yard, high fence. And basically, they've said that large-scale decoupling will not work for them. So the best way is to restrict Chinese access to high technology with defense and national security implications. And that they're doing. And so when they really come down to it, they are able to impact Chinese companies. Several years ago, Huawei was going very strong. And it was American denial of technology to Huawei, which had a significant impact on Huawei at that time. So I think this limited level of control, because they want to also coordinate with the Europeans, because they want to make sure that when Americans stop this access, the Europeans also stop similar access, the Japanese also stop. And the Europeans, for their own reasons, have been reluctant to go into large-scale decoupling with China. So that coordination is being attempted.
Thank you very much. You all have been very lucid, very detailed, informative, and I'm sure it has not been exercise of no use. It has been very informative. I thank you all, and let us give virtual clap to all of you. Now we have about 10 minutes. I don't know whether participants want to ask any questions. Any questions from the audience? I don't see any hand raised, so I think among the panelists, you want to ask each other any question, we have another 10 minutes. Among the panelists, you can ask questions
yes.
each other if you want
to. May I ask a question to Professor Kondapalli?
Okay.
I think, this issue was raised by Manoj, I think, about India-China relationship, frozen since 2020 on the bilateral plane, while we are working together on the multilateral plane. Does he see any change during 2024, considering the reports that at last India may have a new Chinese ambassador?
Dr.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I think that is still speculative in nature because back channel contacts so far. And on the other side, the army chief had mentioned about the situation on the border, which is still in a way kind of armed stalemate. Both sides have mobilized. The rough figures are 70,000 Chinese in Aksai Chin and 120,000 Indian forces. So that is roughly, and generally the situation is in such a format. In the eastern sector, we have an advantage, Sikkim sector as well. But with the increased spending that China has, we may probably have some issues on equipment and so on. At the political level, June 17, 2020, that unless until peace and tranquility prevails on the border, we will not have bilateral relations. That line has become the Government of India line now. If not the whole of the nation approach, because we still have the bilateral trade and others. But what has happened is 30 dialogue processes have been shut down. The annual strategic dialogue between MEA and MFA, the annual defense dialogue between two defense ministries, the strategic and economic dialogue between Niti Aayog and NDRC, the financial dialogue, steel dialogue, joint working group on FTA proposals. All of these have been stalled. Youth dialogue, media to media coverage, think tank to think tank, all those 10 pillar agreements. So in all, about 30 dialogue processes at the bilateral level have been shut down. The special
Okay.
representatives have not met, which is also where much of the strategic related issues are covered. So what I see in 2024 is the stalemate continuing, at least till the elections are over, because no government in India would take a position before that elections, and very unlikely to have any progress in this regard. So I think even the new ambassador to be appointed, ambassador, she is a financial expert rather than a traditional diplomat. So we probably will see more trust in the investments and others.
Okay.
One
Okay.
quick question to Manoj. Surendra, if you'll allow me.
Let me ask one question to Deepak.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
When we became president of G20, we started totally new program. We had more than 250 meetings and 29 states, all that. What do you see President Lula is going to do as president of G20 in next 1 year? Deepak. Deepak, are you still there? I don't know. I think Deepak might have gone. Yeah, you wanted, Raj, you want to ask something?
Yeah, my question is to Manoj. He said a theory which I've heard in Delhi before, namely the return of Sharif through election will open the pathway to détente between India and Pakistan. What is the basis of this conviction? Do you not think that the Pakistan army would still hold him back? And do you not think that India will be held back by the conventional policy now, which is standard, that as long as terrorism persists, there's no question of any dialogue with Pakistan? How do you look at it, sir?
Okay, Manoj, as usual, to the point. Yes.
You know, as far as Pakistan's concerned, one is it's very poor condition, meaning it's really economy has really gone through, to the bottom. Politically, we are seeing Imran Khan sentenced 10 years in jail, which, this is almost reminds you of the Bhutto times. The other thing is that the army, the point you made, my impression is that the current army chief does not enjoy the kind of authority, that his predecessor had. So even the army's effect, influence in Pakistani society has declined. On the other hand, we know that Nawaz Sharif, because of his own personal experience with the army, is someone who is not going to cooperate with the army easily. He will do it on a pragmatic basis. But as far as he's concerned, yes, there's no love lost for the army. So that's why I think that will happen. And I had one more point. I had raised my hand to say this with regard to China. That, you see, there is every possibility that we might work out a deal with the last two blockade points. That is the Depsang Plain, Depsang Bulge, and the Charding Nala. The problem is not that, meaning you can go back, we can create no patrol zones there, which we have created in the other blockade points. But my point is that what 2020 has done is to have undermined the trust between the two countries. And so that with the trust gone, trying to rebuild anything, I think is going to take a long, long time.
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, my gratitude to all of you. And I think it is a good exercise, and we will again touch base on 30th December 2024. Bye-bye. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.